welcome to one of my live art group sessions. It's Wednesday afternoon and today we're having a look at an impressionistic landscape. Not something I do a lot of, so we're going to have a bit of an experiment today. Let's see what we can do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, this is a piece of Bockingford paper. This is 13 inches by 9. It's the 140 pounds or 300 grams per square metre. I'm going to start a distant hillside, and that's halfway up, that's a quarter. It's probably about a fifth of the way down from the top. I'm going to start it there. I'm just going to have it rising slightly and then falling, and then I'll just have it falling a bit more and sort of going away like this. And then there's a foreground area of land here, which I'm going to just draw like this, coming across there like that. And then this whole foreground will have some heather in it and some rocks, and I'm going to do it as a vignette. So the corners I'm going to leave white. I'm not going to paint right down into the corners. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is get the sky on. So we've got quite a complicated palette for later on, but I'm going to put the sky on. This is fairly straightforward. So very often we use this plum colour for the clouds in the sky, and we're going to use it later on as well. So I've put out a blob of ultramarine here, which I'm just stirring into a puddle, the consistency of oil or olive oil, and I'm adding light red to it until I get a lovely deep plum colour, and that colour is quite strong, so not too much water in that. And then I've also put out a blob of cerulean blue from the tube, and I'm not going to add any water to that at all. So this is just to create the sky. So I'm going to put a sky on this. I'm going to use the mini hake. This is the small goat hair brush. So I put it in the water, filled it up. It's nice and swollen. And I'm just going to put a couple of brush loads of water right the way across the area of the sky. Just spread it out and even it out a little bit more. You can see I'm getting water on the tape as well. That'll stop it from drying quickly from the edge. So you can take as long as you like to spread the water out and just get it even. And you'll also notice I've made sure the water comes down below that line there. So all I'm going to do is nothing specific. I'm going to try and create a sky, a sort of patchy blue sky with some white, fluffy white clouds in it, and a little bit of the plum colour to give some shadow in the clouds. So I'm picking up some of the cerulean. So it's important just to get the blue in and leave plenty of white bits in, like this. And this just helps us to create the impression that there's some white cloud floating around. I need a bit more of the blue. It's not really quite strong enough, that. So I've just been back to the palette to get a little bit more, and a bit more again. There we are. So I've got some nice white patches floating around there. And then literally I'm just going to touch the plum colour with the corner of the mini hake, because I only need a very small amount of this. You can see there, just a little touch on the corner of the brush. And I'm just going to randomly flick a little bit of that in here and there. And I hope that there's enough water on the paper to sort of smooth that out and for it to blend into the water. And I think that'll do. I'm just going to leave that to settle all by itself. Okay, so I've actually got the hairdryer on that, and I've had it on for a good minute or so. What happens with this paper is if you just wet part of it, that sort of crinkles up a bit. If you keep it taped down around the edge, if you apply a lot of heat with it with a hairdryer, it will actually stretch back and go flat again. So you don't need to worry if the paper bobbles up a bit. Right, now because I'm using Bockingford paper, all this paint that's come down over the horizon, over the top of this hill here, I can actually clean that off. I'm using a 1/2 inch flat brush here full of water. I'm going to give that a good scrub up onto the pencil line and then dab that with kitchen towel. And by the way, just one other little tip. If you are using kitchen towel for this, surprisingly, kitchen towel is quite abrasive. So I would never recommend that you rub the paper with it. Only ever just dab like that, because it can actually scratch the paper. Okay, so this is ready now for me to paint, but we've got to spend a lot of time on the palette. This is really important. I'm going to put try a lot of colours in this. Remember what I said earlier, it is a bit experimental, but I need to make sure the palette's well prepared. So this is the plum from earlier, that was the cerulean from earlier. So what I've done is I've got some yellow ochre here. So if you have a tube of yellow ochre, you can use that. What I've done is I've combined raw sienna and lemon yellow in equal quantities, stirred them together to create yellow ochre. Down here, I know it probably looks a bit dark on the video, but this is alizarin crimson with some ultramarine in it, and it gives you this gorgeous heather colour. And over here, I've got a little bit of burnt umber, which I've just put a bit of water in, and then here it's basically some of the cerulean blue from earlier from the sky and a little bit of lemon yellow, and it gives you this lovely soft, almost turquoisey colour here. But you'll notice, you can probably be able to see on the palette if I tip it, that's really wet, that's really milky. So these colours here, apart from the plum originally, which is still quite strong, the rest of the colours on the palette here should be pretty wet, quite loose, because I'm going to run these colours in really quickly. So I'm going to paint this distant background hill here, and I want to try and create a patchwork quilt of different colours. It's going to be really impressionistic, so the form, it's really important that we get the form of the land as it comes, cascades down from the top down to the right hand side there. So I've got 3 brushes here. I've got my spearhead brushes 6, 8 and 10, so I'm probably going to use all 3. I'm going to start with the spearhead 6, and I'm going to start with that yellow ochre. So I've filled the brush with water, picking up a little bit of the yellow, and I'm just going to scribble in some yellow patches higher up. A little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit back there perhaps. Okay, I'm going to go straight to the burnt umber. I'm going to put a little bit of the burnt umber into the brush, and then the dry patches between the yellow I can sort of drift in a little bit of that. Maybe come down from the top a little with that, and you'll see that the colours should blend together. Quite happy for that to happen in this impressionistic style. Let's get a little bit of the heather colour. So I'm going to stay with the number 6. I've wet the brush, just cleaned it and wet the brush. And I'm going to put some of this heather colour now up here in little patches. Put a bit there and a little bit down here somewhere perhaps. It's quite random, but you can see the brush is moving quite swiftly from right to left. Let's get some water in the brush. That's better, so that it flows. Okay, now I'm going to use the number 10 brush. I'm going to pick up some of that turquoisey colour. I'm going to drag that all the way through here. All through that bottom section. Lovely wide brush this. I can pull the colour through really quickly into that pink a little bit so that it blends. And I don't mind leaving a little white bit here and there either. And then I'm going to use the number 8. I'm going to finish off with the number 8. And I'm going to use a little bit of the plum, just a little touch on the tip of the brush. I'm going to create some darker form in it now, just using that plum. A little bit across the top. I might just bring some in from the other side as well here. Long, smooth brush strokes will give you that lovely impression of the form of that land. Right, let's have a quick look at that and see if I need anything else. I'm going to put a tiny bit more just on that ridge. Just sort of pull it down. I don't want to do any more than that. I think that's given me a nice impression of a multicoloured form of a distant hill. I'm going to leave that to settle off and dry, and then we'll add a little bit of detail to that. That's settled off quite nicely now, and it looks a little bit plain. So I want to try and put some brush marks, particularly in this lower area here, that are going to help enhance the impression of these being meadows. So I'm going to use the rigger, and I'm going to use my 1/2 inch flat brush. I'm just going to put a few markings on. Some nice little techniques here for you to try. So with the flat brush, I've just put a bit of water in that. I'm going to get a tiny bit of that plum on the tip of the brush, and I'm going to just drop the brush down like this. You can kind of slice it, a little bit more paint. You can slice it a little bit, or just drop the brush down. It'll make those lovely horizontal marks, which could be anything. Little clusters of rocks or whatever. I might do a little bit up this way here as well. Let's do a little bit coming down there as well. I've got to twist my wrist around to get the right angle there. And then the rigger. So with the rigger, you've got to be really careful you don't get a big clump of paint on the end of the rigger. So what I do with the rigger is I fill it with water, pick up a little paint, and then I kind of draw it away from the paint like that. And what that'll do is it'll draw the tip of the brush into a nice sharp point, so you don't end up with a lump of paint on the end. And a few tentative lines coming down. Let's go from that little white patch. A few tentative lines coming down, suggesting little field boundaries. I could even do one up here. Let's make that into a field boundary up there. Look, let's have that look like a dry stone wall. Again, this is something you've got to be careful you don't overdo. We're not looking for a major feature here, just a few markings to suggest a little bit of movement down the land. And then the last thing I'm going to do with the rigger, which is a really nice technique, is to just get some paint in it. Again, not too full, and I'm going to lay the rigger down flat. So I'm holding the brush right with my fingers, holding the brush down really flat. I'm going to drop it down on the paper and then flick it upwards. Just be a tiny bit more paint in the brush there, and it'll look like little clusters of shrubs or trees. And then maybe dotted about down here there's a fence. So again, impression, just some fence posts. That's that whole section done and dried, and now I want to create this really impressionistic foreground. So what am I after here? I'm after a meadow sweeping down with tufts of heather on here, and I'm also going to try and put a few rocks in as well, and a few flicks here and there to try and get some various grasses and things. So again, it's an impression. I'm going to try and leave the bottom corners white so that all of the impression is kind of here in the center of the frame. Before we do that, I want to just quickly show you a method which I've shown on one or two of my videos before, where I'm going to use a credit card to create rocks. This is a bit of that plum colour that we had earlier. I've put that on quite thick, as you can see there. And what I'm going to do is, this is an old KFC card, I think. That's rounded corner, so I'm not using the corner of the card, I'm going to use the flat edge of the card, but I'm going to put my index finger on the corner and hold it with my thumb underneath, press down and bend, and then scratch, like that. And what it does is it just takes off these lovely chunky areas of paint. Okay, so that's the method. Here we go then. So I'm going to use the mini hake and lots of water. I'm going to start with some of the yellow ochre, brush full of water, a little of the paint, and I'm going to just start introducing that across here, so that I'm putting all this initial stage in with this mini hake, but I want to leave lots of white areas in the centre here for the heather. So there we are, I've left the bottom unpainted and white there. So I want this to be quite wet, and I've deliberately left those dry white areas. So I'm just going to put the tip of the brush into the plum. Just picked a little up on the tip there. I'm going to drift a little bit of that in. Just pull it so that it, again, it just helps us to get a little bit of the sense of terrain. Like I said, this is a bit of an experiment, so I'm hoping it's going to work. And then I'm going to use my number 10 brush. Now I'm going to fill it with water. I'm going to go to my lilac colour, my heather colour, pink. And I'm going to start scribbling that in. Try and leave a few white patches here and there as well. Go back to the palette, reload. So I'm not talking very much at the moment because I'm concentrating. But the idea is to just keep scribbling that paint in to put the colour in place as quickly as I can. I'm spreading a little of it out into that sort of yellow area. Let's put a little bit in the foreground here as well. It's all still wet. Yeah. It's all wet into wet. Right, that'll do. And then I'm going to just wet the brush, tip of the brush again. I'm going to pick up some of the plum. So this is the much stronger paint that we had earlier. And we need some darker areas in here to try and give it a little bit of depth. Just here and there. And then all I'm going to do now is decide where I want to try and put my lumps of rock. So I think what I'll do is I'll just focus on this area. I'll put 2 or 3 lumps of rock there and a couple over on this side here. So I'm just going to make sure I get plenty of the plum paint on there. That area, and I'll put plenty just here. That's where my rocks are going to be. A little bit higher up perhaps there. Now let's see how this goes. See how it goes. I'll put this flat down, almost flat down. Index finger down, thumb underneath, press really hard and pull. Little cluster of rocks there, and over there as well. I'll have one more. I've got a kebab stick here with a sharp tip. Let's see if I can create a few. Scratch a few bits of. That's too wet there, it's not going to work there. Yeah, that gives us a little impression of a few flicks of grass. There it is, that's dried off. It just needs lifting a bit now, needs a little bit of life, and you'll find a lot of Impressionistic artists these days tend to favour this sort of splattering, which I think really works well. You can actually splatter white mediums on this, like gouache or acrylic. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use the darker paint. So I'm going to just get my number 8 brush, fill it with water, pick up a little of my heather colour, and I'm going to hold it horizontally over the paper and I'm going to tap it. Like this, and create this lovely splatter. It's amazing how much energy it can give to a painting. A little bit up there perhaps, across the heather in here. I'm going to really go for it in this corner here now. Put quite a bit down there. So I don't know what your feelings are about splattering, but I think that really gives it some life and energy. And it also helps to cover over a few sins, if there are any, in your painting. sort of takes your eye away from any little bits you're not happy with. Maybe a few birds in the sky, and I'm going to put a little bit of colour on these rocks, just a tiny bit of water and a little bit of burnt umber on these rocks. It just helps them to look a little bit more three-dimensional. There we are, a little touch of burnt umber here and there. Just puts a little bit of colour in. So we'll have a look at that at the end once I've got some birds painted on it, but I'm not going to do any more. What I will say is that painting impressionistically like this is not as easy as it looks. And if you try it, you'll find that it's really quite difficult not to try to get too much detail. Remember what Impressionism is. It's just light, colour and form, and it's very popular. So I hope you have fun having a go, and I'll see you on another video.